to carry the theme with the red beer thing, I don't know if you know it or not, but real red beer comes from the color inside of copper kettles.
Oh, that makes sense.
I didn't have time to prepare for today, so forgive me. But for another beer and gear, I have a buddy who's a world-class brewmeister. He's won the Pilsner Awards in Bavaria. Like, it's for real, big time. And he's run breweries for Heilemann, Red Stripe. Like, he's done world business. But he, 20 years ago now or better, came back to Wisconsin after doing a bunch of stuff, ran a big brewery for Busch in Florida. And he came back just so he could do old school brewing, because Wisconsin is full of Germans and Irish and a bunch of people who brew beer. And back in the day, like, he actually took the copper kettles out of the brewery that was in my wife's hometown that had closed down decades previously. Mm-hmm. And they were brewing real red beer. And what that is when they ferment everything in those copper kettles, that's where it gets that red color. It's not because they add dye to it or from cherries or from some other thing. And he's obviously a degreed chemist, but he's also got a 30 or 40 year history now as a brewmaster. And he's just a blast. His name's Kirby Nelson, and he currently owns or works in Wisconsin Brewery, which is based out of Madison, and they do all kinds of super cool stuff. He's introduced me to all kinds of crazy beer. You'd love them.
Oh, wow. Can you taste that copper? Do you get is there some kind of metallic taste to it on a real red beer?
Not really. And especially not with his beers. His stuff is super hoppy, which is awesome. I love it. I also happen to be allergic to hops, which is a lot of the reason I usually drink cider.
Wow, that's weird.
It is a little weird, especially with my background, because I was 18 or 19 and working at a guitar store, and Kirby used to bring in his guitars, and he's like, "Hey, I'll swap you out, like throw some strings on here." And then he'd bring me a couple of growlers of something that he's working on in the Skunk Works. It was awesome being able to go up the road a mile and actually drink out of a 5,000 gallon vat, unfiltered beer. It was like Irishman's paradise, right? But I told him, I said, "Man, I love your beer, Kirby." I said, "But I drink it and I just end up with a splitting headache the next day." And he's like, "Well, you should try drinking 2." And I'm like, "Okay, even if I drink 2, I get a splitting headache." And he's like, "Oh," he goes, "Sounds like you're allergic to hops." And I'm like, ready to swing at him. I'm like, "I'm Irish. I can't be allergic to hops." And we're walking through, and he hands me some hops. I had no idea what those were. And he goes, "Here," he goes, "chew on these." So I chew on them. I'm like, "What are those?" Like, they're kind of, this isn't good. And he's like, "No," he goes, "I just wanted you to try them. They're hops." And I'm like, "Oh." And 5 minutes later, I'm all stuffed up, and he goes, "Yep, my friend, you are going to have to switch to wine or something else." And I can still drink some beer, but if I drink hoppy beers, it always gets me.
So welcome to cider and gear. It doesn't rhyme with What are you drinking now?
I'm actually, I'm feasting on a woodchuck, which is pretty much generally the default cider that's not too crazy, not too sweet. I prefer if you're into ciders, everybody's, "Oh, I want a dry cider." Okay, not my deal. I just want something that tastes great, like apples, and it doesn't have to be super sugary. But it's either that or there's Norman ciders. So if it tastes like it came out of a field or a barnyard, that's more of a Norman cider. And Magners and some of the other stuff that Irish ciders and all that stuff are more like that. But this was in the fridge and it's cold, and it was a decision to be made between red, the amber, or the green Granny Smith, and I went green Granny Smith. Ta-da!
You can have both. We have no rules. We're day drinking at work.
Are you kidding? I am going to have both. That's why I brought both.
Wes, what are you drinking?
I am drinking from our local brewery here in town, Armadillo Ale Works. This is the Quakertown Stout. It is actually brewed with maple syrup and oats. All of these Armadillo Ale Works names, I think all of their beers actually from places that are like neighborhoods here in Denton where I live. So there's the Idiot Hill Lager. We literally have a neighborhood we call Idiot's Hill. It's Denton, man. We're like Austin's dumb younger brother. So We and Felix is
We actually have a convict hill near my house.
Really?
It is Texas.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
There's also Slaughter Road, and I really thought something really crazy happened, and no, it was just a guy named Slaughter. And
I thought that was just if
away.
you went east in Austin.
that was it.
well, what are you drinking, Felix?
I'm drinking Fancy Lamore, St. Arnold. So kept it Texas. And
Right.
I saw you have a jacket, but I wanted to match you. And the problem is we threw away all of them, and it's just these two belong to my wife. This one, it's a little bit too much. The other one is my favorite, and she had it from a bachelorette party or something before we got together, and I really wanted her to keep it forever. And it's
nice. Yeah, that is yours.
That's absolutely mine. And I usually give it to people that visit. Like if you come over or my dad comes over, that's what I'm giving him a beer on. And it's amazing because if it's hot in Texas, you never say no to that. But
Yeah, forgive me.
Comes at a
'cause
price.
Coming from Wisconsin, I'm looking at this going, why are these guys so into beer koozies? And I'm like, oh yeah, wait a minute. It's not the same down there as it is up here.
No,
It's a balmy 30 degrees in
like 5
Madison today.
seconds.
it is really cold here in Austin at 59 right now, I think.
Yeah, he's freezing to death there.
Geez, hope you guys don't freeze.
I know. So I feel really stupid because I post up stuff about me running in the cold, in the mornings. And like today, it was really freezing and I had all these layers on and it was 31 degrees, which that's generally below freezing, but I had like 20 layers of stuff on. I'm like, I'm such a Texas dude. If you go up north and watch people run, they're running in shorts and like a long sleeve shirt in that weather. And I literally had 5 layers on my chest and 3 layers on my legs. And I was cold.
My son, and I don't know, maybe 2 years ago, he finally started wearing some pants sometimes because he's got a job where he needs to. Otherwise, all winter long, Wisconsin, it didn't matter if it was 30 below. He still had shorts on. Hiking boots, but wearing shorts, maybe a jacket.
Crazy.
I always call it the false winter here in Texas because you have that one day that it dips below 50 or mid 50s and everybody just walks out and they it's like fall is here finally, we're getting cold weather. I'm like no, remember people, tomorrow you're gonna be wearing shorts again, just don't get too excited. Get your Uggs out and your jackets, and then the next day you're swimming again somewhere.
That's the way to do it, I tell you, because I won't be swimming for a while still up here. Matter of fact, this week we got 10.5 inches of snow one day, and I got to shovel part of my roof. No joke.
See, that's something that I'm never going to understand, shoveling your roof.
Yeah, well, here's what happens if you don't. You don't have to shovel the entire roof. I used to tease the kids and tell them I'd make them go out and shovel the lawn. But you have to clear your driveway, which that's not so bad if you've got machinery for it, right? But if you, in my house, which has a pretty steep pitch still, if you don't and you get a lot of snow and it continues to pile up, it destroys your roof, because on the edges, what'll happen is it looks beautiful, and you've seen pictures of it where these beautiful icicles all trickle over the edge and the top of the whatever you have to deal with water, right? So, eaves and gutters and eaves are on all the houses up here. And so what happens is it fills that up, it freezes over, and then all the water runs down into your foundation, and it causes you problems, and it can actually go up underneath the shingles as spring comes. And once it freezes, there's really no way to get rid of it. So you have to do it before all that happens. So they make roof rakes is what they call them. And it's, a couple feet wide, and it looks like a snow shovel a little bit. It's just curved on the front, and it's got a big pole, and it's reinforced. So you, with a long aluminum handle, and you just put it up there and you pull off the 6 feet that lead up to it. So there you know. Now, just in case either one of you Texans need to move to Wisconsin, you know what to do with your roof.
There is
hire
no
somebody.
reason why I would ever need to move to Wisconsin. Just the fact that you just had to explain how to rake your roof, that pretty much sold me on not doing that.
Right on.
So I saw the snow for the first time in my life. I was 20 years old.
Really?
Yeah. It snowed in Dallas. I lived in Dallas at the time. I worked retail, and I remember being so excited that the next morning was going to snow, and I woke up early, and looked, and then I realized I've never driven in the snow, and I over prepare for it. So I ended up getting to work way too early because it wasn't as hard as I thought it would be. And I loved the snow until I went to a lunch break and I realized this is dirty. This is just dirty. It melted by 7 p.m. So it didn't last. But that was like, I'm cool with this once in a while.
We get those ice storms. You
Yeah.
know, that's the problem here. When I was doing monitors at House of Blues the year that the Super Bowl was here. There was big Super Bowl parties that were happening at House of Blues. It was like a big deal. And we had this giant ice storm. So it was people trying to get, thousands of people that had paid all this money to get the Super Bowl and they could barely get there and they're sliding all over the place. We had like an inch of ice on every road. It was absolutely bonkers.
Yeah, you guys get that. We get ice, but typically what happens here is it freezes and then everything stays frozen and they either plow over it or there's some snow on it or they throw salt on it to melt it if they need to. But you kind of know what you're dealing with. It's not like you guys get it down there where it's just like a hockey rink for, 12 hours or 24 hours. It doesn't do that up here. So I'll take this.
Good, man. So Pat, who are you? Where do you come from? How do you get in this business? What happened? Who did you wrong?
Well, first thing is, whenever you bet, gentlemen, be careful what you wager. Truly, I got into the industry as part of a work release program.
All right.
And after that, it was all, seriously, I'm super thankful to still have a gig in this industry. I've grown up in the upper Midwest. I'm a bass player, as you might notice. Not necessarily talented. I got to do that for 10 years. I never did anything super famous, but I've opened for every washed up rock act from the 80s and some into the 90s that you could imagine and had a blast doing all that. Owned a sound company from that because I was the only one responsible in the business of the band that I was left with all the debt when everybody else quit. As everybody else knows this story, because, if of the 47 people who've actually tuned in today, at least 38 of them have the exact same story as all the rest of us.
You have that many cousins?
Dude, I'm Irish. I couldn't even begin to count how many cousins I have.
Dude, I'm Latino and they're not listening to this. They're doing something else.
There are two things that the Irish are good at. And one is drinking, and that leads to the other thing that we're good at. But anyway, so I did a bunch of that stuff. I ended up on the supply side of the industry. I came up out of MI and music stores and a little PA shop that was up here. And I ended up landing a gig as a rep. I did some fun stuff. Back in the day, I helped with some of the development team work with Shure, which happens to be a highway line, right? When they were first coming out with the PSM 600 in-ear monitors back in the day, I used the Garwoods, which were the only thing that you could get for, radio ears at the time. And Shure came out with a 600. And inside of about, I think it was one summer, and remember, this is in Wisconsin, right? I think I sold a couple of dozen, or maybe, I want to say it was more than that, but I don't want to brag, of the PSM 600 systems. And literally, Shure had asked the rep at the time, where in the hell are these going? Who is buying these? And they're like, this one little MI shop's got a guy that's into it. And I literally set up everybody that I had with a system, and I'd let them take them out for a month. I go, here's the deal. Take them out for a month. If you don't want it, bring it back. I'll sell it to somebody else. And everybody took one in the store that I had. We had a really smart owner, and he was like, I don't know how these guys are going to pay for them, but tell them we'll give them till the end of summer to pay for them. And we didn't lose the money on one of them. And so fast forward, I got hired into the rep firm that worked with Shure up in Chicago and Wisconsin, and I worked there for about 15 years. I worked for a couple other manufacturers as well and got to do some world business, and that was fun. I worked with a cool company by the name of Sound Devices for a few years, and I got an executive role there where I got to throw a huge party at the 7th floor of the Heineken Brewery, which is their penthouse bar. That was my world sales meeting. It was a blast.
Wow.
But the world travel thing is pretty tiring for the guys who already know this from touring. It's no big deal, but when you're in Istanbul and you can't talk to your kids because they're already in bed and, stuff like that, I was like, I think I'll work back in the U.S. and landed a gig with Alan and Heath and love this job. Been here a few years now and work as the U.S. Central Regional Manager. I still, moonlight as a musician occasionally. I volunteer at a what's a large church for Madison isn't a large church necessarily for Texas, but so I'm pretty close to that type of work, and I help train people and help them use gear, and I get to do that all day long with Alan and Heath, and I'm super thankful to have the gig in the industry. So that's pretty much me in a nutshell.
Sparkle.
Yeah.
Explain that to me really quick.
Explain the sparkle thing.
Yeah. Well, there's a couple of different stories about it. One is, as you can tell, I got a little gray in my hair, and when I was young, one of the stories is that I made a film, which thankfully is not in digital distribution. Nobody will find it, but my stage name was Johnny Sparkle.
What kind of film?
Okay, yeah. We need more context.
That's about all you get on this. And then the other thing that it also transferred over at the time to my business card when I was working at the retail shop and I was doing all the PA and my sound company, all that. I was the guy that people would call when their stuff would blow up. And as I mentioned, I had a family and stuff, and hadn't been home on a Friday night, and I don't know how long. And somebody called me at 11 o'clock, just raging about something that broke. And I was like, okay, dude, I'll take care of you on Monday. And they came in on Monday, and it was a product that my store didn't sell. And I went, that's it. And this is back in the day. This is pre-cell phones, right? In order to get a gig, if you had a sound company or if you were a musician, you had to have your name in the phone book or nobody could find you. And I went, I can't get the phone book changed at this time. I'm going to change my name at work. And they said, well, we'll print you new business cards. What are you going to use for a name? And I said, Johnny. And they're like, Johnny what? I'm like, Sparkle. So it worked. And the fun part was I got hired into the rep firm. The principal of that firm said, you're not using that name with this company. And at the time, Betty Pulowski from Sure, who knew me from my work previous, I got on a training at NAMM the first year, and I walked in, and the guys that I worked with were gentlemen, just great guys. And I love them all to this day, and still get to work with them because they're my Allen and Heath rep, right? And so Lester's helping me make sure I got my tie on straight, and he goes up to introduce me, and Betty turns around and she looks at me, she goes, Sparkle, you're on my team, sit down and shut up. And I just looked at Les and said, well, it sticks, you know? So my friends call me Sparkle. That's the short answer to the long story.
If we watch this film, we will be able to drive in a car with you again without laughing or being uncomfortable.
Dude, there's a tagline. It's really easy. I'm only 5'6", and you know, it looks big on me. The shirt, you know, whatever it would be.
This is going south really quick. We should stop drinking. You
asked for more information. That's as much as I'll give you. Yeah.
So how long ago did you start with Allen and Heath?
It's been in this position. I've been here 3 years, but with AudioBiz, I repped the line for about 10 years. Right. And actually, at the time that Glenn was still part of the company, who was our managing director at the time, I was involved in that team when they learned that I'd done a bunch of stuff with in-ears and that I'd been working with, you know, musicians, teaching them how to use that technology. I helped with some of the input on the ME series products that we still sell and do really well with. So it's been fun.
What was the flagship when you started? And I'm trying to get the evolution of, I'm trying to get to the evolution of the brand and what you've seen change and whatnot.
Oh, we were just selling analog desks back then, dude. We didn't even have a digital console. I sold, like, the one that everybody remembers is the GL series, but whether it was an ML or if it was a 5000 or if it was a 2800 or whatever else it was, they were great desks, and they were all workhorse desks. We weren't really, you know, like first call on riders and stuff like that for a lot of the big tour stuff. Back then, there was a different company that existed with the same name that they have now, but back then their gear sounded amazing. And that was kind of first call for a lot of that stuff. I think Wes used to tour with some of it. But that's the name that remains unspoken. It's kind of like Voldemort in the industry, right?
Right.
But the cool thing was, when I was working with AudioBiz, they had introduced iLive. And I was the first person in the company to say, good, I'll take it on. You know, give me one of these things. I'll learn how to use it. I'll figure out how we teach it, how we sell it. And I had a blast with it. iLive was not a tremendous success for Allen and Heath as a sales unit. It was revolutionary in a couple of different things. It was the first time any manufacturer had ever taken basically the engine and the brain and made that separate from what the control surface would be. And they also made it a networkable system, right? So the iLive had different surfaces, and there were different versions of iLive over time. Some of them started out like modular, like you could build whatever you want. And there were different things that did and didn't catch on. But we had some pretty good success with some of the pre-formatted consoles where you'd have a surface and then you'd have the stage rack, which was separate. And then also the other innovation that they had at the time was it was the first time that anybody had created software where you could actually run the system with basically a laptop. So it was really cool. And then, fast forward from iLive to the DLive series and a lot of the products we do now, it's a totally different innovation, right? Even at that time, everybody knew that you could only do so much with so many DSP chipsets, right? Like you could have more channels. This goes for every brand, doesn't matter whether it was us or somebody else. Like you can have more processing and you can have more channels. But we looked at it and went, this isn't the way to do it, because all of the sort of design difficulties that you have by expanding that, you can build a bigger boat, but it doesn't make it move faster or float better. And so the engineers at Allen and Heath at that time invested in the current technology that we actually use as kind of the flagship, and we're leading the industry, and that is FPGA processing as opposed to DSP chipsets. And what that is a field programmable gate array. Probably half the people on the call already know what the acronym is. That processor is basically like a computer processor, and it's got exponentially more horsepower digitally than you could ever create by chaining up chipsets. And it gives us some huge advantages in how fast we can throughput signal, how good it sounds. Things can be completely phase coherent all the way through the desk, which nobody had ever really done before FPGAs. Wes has been around this long enough that when, regardless of what the brand was, people started mixing at the turn of the millennium on digital consoles, and everybody talked about how clean it was, but they never said how good it sounded, because everything was clean, but nothing was, phase coherency didn't even exist because you're truncating stuff and sending it out and you have to reclock everything. And it was weird. But with an FPGA, you can make certain that there's 3,000 by 3,000 gazintas and gazautas in the processor that we use to run a DLive as an example. And everything you do inside of the console is set up so that it's always in phase. So we call it mixed coherency. So that sound, when things come out like that, you can hear it. It's audibly different than what you would hear when things aren't. And that's a huge sonic improvement, regardless of dollars or how many channels or anything like that. And then we took that FPGA and we put it in the mainstay of all of our new mixer development. So it's only us and one other manufacturer that even use FPGAs, and it's a significant improvement. So that's kind of fun stuff.
Yeah, and one of the things that's super cool about the DLive platform that I've found from playing around with it and using it and stuff, and is how analog it sounds. And a lot of that I feel like has to do with that phase coherency. When you're using an analog desk, the sound is traveling at the speed of electrons, so there's no latency, there's no having to time align things or any of that. It happens because it's a wire. So that's part of the reason that good design work on analog consoles, you could get a really, really good sound. That's what everybody's been chasing for a long time. When digital consoles first came out, everybody's like, yeah, they don't sound good, but they're just so convenient. Like that was
you
kind
can
of
recall
the thing.
things. You could save your mix. Yeah,
which is amazing. Don't get me wrong, but the whole time everybody was just like, oh, this console sounds great. Well, no, it sounds good for an analog console or for a digital console, but it doesn't sound like an analog console. And over the years, we've started to get a little closer to that. And the DLive really does that. I drew from Billie Eilish's front of house guy. He has a video on YouTube that everybody should watch if you're not hooked up with that guy on
Drew Thornton, right? Drew Thornton. Yeah, he's amazing.
So he has a thing showing how he slams the main left right on his DLive, and it reacts like an analog console. And I tell people all the time, I'm like, don't be afraid to get into the yellow. I know we've been trained for years, just stay away from yellow. It's got to be in the green. Don't get anywhere close to red on a digital console because it sounds like crap. But that's not the case on Allen Heath consoles. You really can treat them like an analog console and kind of get into them, which is awesome.
Yeah, it's almost inevitable when I go out and if I'm a wingman for somebody, they're like, well, I'll go out and use this, but I'd like you to come out for the show. And if I'm in, if it works, then I do it. And that's like one of the things that I'm like, look, dude, hit that thing, hit it. Like, you are babying this. This is silly. I go get a bowling wrist brace, and then start slamming the faders forward, because when you get them up there, that's when it sounds amazing. Like, it's clean and it sounds beautiful at lower volume. But if you want something that sounds like it goes, huh, then go ahead and put it in there. It's great. You can pour it to it.
That's what I like. I like asking that whenever I do trainings or any presentation where you clearly run with sound people that use other mixers. I ask them, what happens if you do this with whatever you're using? And they freak out a little bit. And I was like, just go ahead and do it. What happens if you turn all the effects on? If you get compressors on every channel, and they get freaked out. I'm like, you don't have to negotiate anything right here. You're good to go.
Yeah, it's cool. It's cool.
Yeah, it really reacts. I really, that's one of the things I like about all the Allen Heath platforms, from the SQ to the Avantus to the D-Live, is they react more and feel more to me, an old guy that mixed on analog consoles, coming up. They react and feel more like that to me, with all the cool things that you can do with digital consoles, being able to have multiple output buses and, being able to route everything to anything and, save that and all that good stuff.
I also think the workflow is really important. I think the three of us are musicians. The three of us have been on a stage, and I.
Well, you are. I don't know if Wes and I technically really are musicians.
I'm not a musician. I'm a bass player. You probably play your bass more in the last 9 months than I have. I haven't touched those things in a few months. It's bad. It's really bad. But one of the things I remember clearly when you start seeing more and more digital mixers, one thing that I did not like was the fact that you had things with a huge screen, little amount of knobs, and you had a sound guy just looking at a screen but not seeing what's on the stage. You don't see that a singer is popping their veins trying to hear himself, or you're going up, and I feel like the workflow that D-Live, it allows for the engineer to work as if they were working an analog and keep that connection with the artist that's on stage. That's necessary, in my opinion.
Right on. Yeah, one hand on the one hand on the faders, one hand on the faders, like one hand on the faders here and one hand on whoever your significant other is standing next to you, right? So it fast, doesn't require a lot of.
Exactly.
Perfect.
Exactly. Did I tell you my conversation I had? I had the coolest...
Oh, quick. Hey, I'm sorry to interrupt.
Yeah.
Do you want to say anything nasty about Wes while he's gone? Because it'd be kind of fun.
I've said it all, man.
Okay.
Look at him. There's nothing you can say that would top that face.
Wow. Welcome back, Wes. So as you were saying, Felix, about...
I had a conversation with somebody at NAMM last year, and it was outside of NAMM. It was very interesting. I think I remember telling Wes or calling him like, dude, this is really funny. I get an Uber ride to my hotel, and I start talking to the guy and just small talk with an Uber driver. Pretty busy with the NAMM show. And he's like, no, stay away from there. Way too many people. I'm just doing this on the side. And we start talking. He asked me what I do, and he brings up Shure. He said, like, yeah, I just called him for some support with Wireless Workbench. And I was like, oh, this guy knows what he's talking about. Keep talking about the brands we do, and Allen Heath comes up, and he's like, oh, the people I'm working with just got a D-Live rig, and I love it. He turns out he was Kanye West's monitor guy for the church tour thing he was doing last year, and he was just Ubering because he didn't want to be bored at home and wanted to make some extra cash. He was like, I'm just gonna go crazy at home if I'm not moving. So it was really a really funny conversation, because I had the coolest D-Live real world application conversation with somebody outside of the NAMM show, while around the NAMM show. It was really interesting, and it also showed how you start seeing it more in riders, and that's something that's important. The pre-COVID, we actually started seeing it more and more and more.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and you know, we talk about some of this stuff, and you know, not that this isn't about positioning really or anything, but Alan and Heath's growth in the marketplace has been extraordinary, and it's wonderful, and we're super thankful for it. I think it's a good time for us, right? We have all the right products. We don't pivot our business principles, right? We treat people well, and we try to take care of everybody, and we partner with our dealers, and we take good care of customers. We still have live humans for tech support, you know, stuff like that. Some of the other manufacturers aren't really into that now, and I'm like, okay, we'll just do the best we can. But all that being said, the idea of how we go about, you know, like support and access to market has been amazing, and it's been really good for us. So that's
Yeah. So talking about the whole tech support side of things, it's funny, like literally I got off this call 10 minutes before we went live here, but there's a Texas country artist named Wade Bowen that I'd worked with back in my days of doing the Texas country scene. And they're on a D live, and his monitor guy called me up like literally right before this, and they haven't done a show since December, and they have a show in Spring, Texas right now. They're starting to do some one-off things here and there and some socially distanced stuff. And he's like, hey man, we had a set in front of house guy, and now I can't get anything to work, you know? And I'm like, okay, what do you mean it's not working? And he talks me through it. And it turns out it was just a networking issue. The guy had changed one of the network things because he didn't know what he was doing and was trying to get his iPad to connect. So he'd changed all the network settings. So, of course, that didn't take effect until they shut it down. And then they went to set up today and nothing connected. So I just talked to him how to reset it, and everything was rolling good. But it's just funny. At the end of the call, he's like, you know, this is the only console that I've ever worked on where I literally can call a human being that will stay on the phone with me through the whole thing and figure out how to make this work and make sure that my show goes on. Before, on all the other consoles I've had, I might have an 800 number that maybe I can leave a message and they'll get back to me maybe at some point in the next few hours, you know?
Yeah.
So that was really surprising to him that, you know, he can literally just make a phone call and I'll answer the phone, you know?
Yeah, right on. Right on. Yeah. And so I paused there as I had a bit of a brain stop, but regardless of, you know, like Felix's point about, you know, like we started coming into riders and some of that kind of stuff. The thing that I try to remind people about is like, look, this is just stuff, whether it's on tour with Billie Eilish, which is the #1 touring act in the world, right? And she will continue to be so for a while yet. And guys like Drew Thornton, who've been such amazing partners for us and use our products in such cool and unique ways. And whether it's, you know, like some of this stuff is kind of changing. Like we're talking the beer, and now if we talk the gear part of it, Wes knows all about this, and some of the people who tune in already do too. But for those who don't, we just put out a titanium sided mixer. We actually built a D-Live touring grade mixer, our top of the shelf unit. That's a control surface that's, you know, like this wide and that big, and will mix easily 96 channels. It'll actually do a full 128 in a D-Live system. But you can put that thing in a road case and check it for under 50 pounds. And for those who don't tour, that means that you can go to any country in the world on any airline and never have any additional luggage charges, right? So that's the way we think about things. But the fact that it's built out of titanium is just unbelievably cool. We don't make anything out of blow molded plastic, and it only weighs, you know, like it's literally like, you know, pounds less than anything we've ever built.
That was one of the coolest things at NAMM last year. I remember being able to just lift it with one finger, like, hey, check it out. Like, and they go like, no.
Yeah.
You know, that was great.
So that kind of stuff has given us innovations. Now, that's not the only place it's being used, but that's the kind of stuff that we're doing. And frankly, when you think about the fact that most of these competitors are building these 6-figure consoles, and ours are less than half of that. And like for the biggest stuff we build, right? And you can build modular systems and do all this cool stuff. I like to think of DLive as like an audio Lego set, right? Like you build anything you want. Like, do you want it to be big? Do you want it to be little? Do you want it to look like, you know, which Starship cruiser do you want it to build it to look like? You know, like it's literally like playing with Legos, put the pieces together. So that's been fun and it's innovative for us. And what's funny about it from my perspective as the regional, I'm dealing with people all the time that are always talking about budget, but they aren't talking about what their needs are. And it's like, how about we address needs first? And then when you know that it sounds the way you want it to, we'll look at what the budget is. And if I can actually get them into that conversation, it's inevitable that it always ends up like, well, wait a minute, this isn't near the price of what that is. And I'm like, no, it's not. Is that okay? Well, what are you not, what am I not getting? You know, and it's sort of like, okay, well, we could raise our pricing a lot, but that just doesn't make any sense because we can do all this with our innovation. Can we just do that for you? Now, we'll never be as cheap as some of the disposable products that are in the market, right? Because we just don't build stuff that way. It's not our style. But it's fun to be able to have those conversations and play with the Legos.
I think that's the beauty of the system, right? How modular it is and the ability to find out what their needs are. That's every conversation. And Wes might be the same when you start talking about a system, people call you and tell you, I think I was looking at an S7000 and this, and it's like, whoa. Let's just talk about what you need first. And I think that's what makes the system beautiful, that you can go in either direction and not sacrifice audio or features. And so,
yeah, if I had a dime for every conversation that started off with me saying, you know, what are you trying to achieve? You know, like what is the end goal here? You know, and that's how I always do it, because I say this all the time. It's like there's 1,000 ways to skin this cat. So what are you trying to achieve here? You know, oh, I want front of house and I want a broadcast and I want a monitor. Okay, how many inputs, how many outputs do you want? Okay, do you want them in different places? Okay, you know, and like you can design from that point, and it ends up being a bespoke system for people. And that's, people have a hard time wrapping their head around the fact that no matter what you're trying to do, we can do it. It's just a matter of how many places you want those things.
Felix, did he just say that it was on a bespoke system?
Yes, I did.
Yeah, I didn't know that Wes would know that he was talking about bespoke unless he was on his bicycle.
Man, you need to quit being mean to Wes. I would never say ill things about him.
You wouldn't. Well, not while he's on. Not while we see him. You know, not while he's now he's on the video.
Gone for a minute, and I came back, and there was something that happened there.
Not to his beautiful face.
I'm just gonna blow right over that and pretend like that didn't really happen. You know.
Yeah. Well, that's why I can tell you guys are a family.
A highly dysfunctional one.
Hey, right, dude, you're the bass player. You put the funk in dysfunction, right?
We should end right now. That's it.
That's it. That's it. Bang.
And cut.
We've talked to you live. Avantus.
Yep.
It's been like the little superstar of the last few months.
Sorry, I just said I wasn't going to do that, but I just did. It was kind of fun. I had cameras, so I used them.
It was actually kind of cool.
Yeah. First time you ever had a camera show.
Let me chug a second beer. Do it again.
Okay, ready? Ta-da. Awesome. Yeah, perfect. So your question was, we're going to talk about Avantus.
Yeah, where does it sit in the market? Where does it sit in the Allen and Heath family, and why is it revolutionary?
It's good question. DLive here, Avantus is like it's slightly below it because of price point and feature set and size, but it's literally like another member of the DLive family almost. All of the processing and the stuff that it does looks and resembles and behaves amazingly like DLive. Now it is a smaller format. So DLive does the big stuff, right? It's 128 channels, mixable channels. There's 160 channels if you count effects returns and all that stuff. And then DLive has 64 user assignable and user definable output buses. So 64 output buses, you could make them be anything that you want. And that's kind of a new idea for some people, because they're like, well, no, how many outputs does it have for monitors? How many auxes? I'm like, no, you can make it be anything you want it to be. So we took that design idea. You guys, and most of your customers probably know, the folks tuning in, we had the SQ series, which is the little brother to what the DLive technology was. It was the FPGA, and then we took a smaller FPGA and put it into a 48 input console. That's the SQ, and all of that series works really well and is amazing, and we just eat tons of market. But we had kind of a gap in there, and the gap is filled by one console, and that's the Avantus. And the Avantus does 64 mixable inputs with 42 output buses. But separate from just the numbers and the math, it's like having a small portable DLive, and I have this thing sitting in front of me. I can literally pick this up and carry it myself. It is made out of cast aluminum frame, and it's got these gargantuan touch screens. They're 15.6 inches diagonal, right? And it's a touch screen that everything's just one layer deep on it. Anything that you want to get to is right there, and they operate independently. So you can get to different things on different screens, and everything's there. I won't go into a super deep product training on it, but it has just been I'm quoting someone else in the industry who is really big in a lot of the house of worship market, and said that it's become the darling of the house of worship installations with a specific focus for streaming mixing. Yeah. There's nothing that makes it a streaming mixer, but we can do this with any of our series, whether it's DLive or Avantus or SQ or even smaller stuff. But our products lend themselves so well to it. They're so clean, they're so easy to use, and they're so powerful in a lot of the processing that it's just been an enormous hit. I sort of make the joke, being from Wisconsin, you know, like there are plows on every road every time it snows, right? And then in the rural areas, they have these things that they call V plows, and they're literally both lanes wide, and you have to get off the road or back up if they're coming at you on a county road. And it's this giant wing plow. And it just comes down the middle of the road, and no matter how deep it is, it moves everything out of its way. And Avantus has kind of been doing that in the entire midsection of the market.
Mm-hmm. And the thing looks beautiful, man. For somebody that's into bikes, it looks like a really cool bicycle.
Yeah, well, it's the side of it's designed like a super bike frame, right? So yeah. Super cool. Yeah, it's right on.
Yeah, all right. People say that all the time. It looks like a motorcycle when you look at it from the side because of the way the aluminum is rolled. And
I wish I had a good Brit accent. The tubular exoskeleton, you know, it's it's the idea, and that's why it's got the rigidity it does, you know. So it's cool. Yeah, I think we're gonna, you know, like I secretly think that some of the mech engineering team in the UK is bucking for some like hipster design awards because it does look that cool. Mm-hmm. The guy that's the head of our mech engineering team is actually a former British tank commander. So like you couldn't have a better story to tell than that, right? Like these are in fact built like a tank, and it's by a former tank commander. So it's cool. It's awesome.
That's funny. Yeah, I've done the thing where, you know, talking about the SQ, there's some other consoles that we're not going to talk about that are in that same kind of price range and that same kind of playing in those same waters. And I've done a couple of times where I've put an SQ down on the ground, and, you know, I'm a 220-pound dude, and I'm not small. And I put an SQ down on the ground and stood on the top edge of it for a few seconds, and then stepped off of it and said, okay, let's take that other brand and put it on the floor and let me stand on it. Let's see which one works, you know, after that's done. And nobody has ever taken me up on that. But you can do that on an SQ because it's made out of metal, you know. That thing is made to last.
Dude, you can do that on a Z mixer. I have actually done it where, you know, like I'm not Wes's frame, right? But even our Z mixers they're a metal chassis, and each one of the pots is individually nutted. So that like they're a pain in the butt to take apart. But the idea is that they're so solid, I literally can stand on one of those. And I did a training at a major, you know, like dealer for us. And I went in to do the training, and I was standing behind of like sort of this little wheeled desk and podium thing. And I said, I'm taller than I was here. The last time I was here, I'm at least 3 inches taller. And everybody's looking at me because I'm only 5'6" anyway. Like whatever, dude. And then I had one of my buddies literally roll the podium away and I'm standing on a Zed mixer. And they're all like, that's funny, you know? And then I had one of the guys come up, his name's Jim, and I've known him for a long time. And he's like, Sparkle, what if I stand on that mixer? And I go, you're doing it now? And I'm taking a picture. And Jim probably goes 300 pounds, you know, like he's a big dude. He's just huge. And so he's literally standing on top of this little tiny Zed mixer. Second stand on it mixer story. You guys got me started. I'm 2 beers in now. Kevin Madden, my brother, my regional brother, who covers the East and the Southeast for us. Kevin works out of Nashville and he's just a blast. He's been in the console industry forever, right? And he, in a summer training, we were on with probably 50 people doing a Zoom training. And we're trading off, and he's doing QU and I'm doing SQ, and we're kind of trading some stuff back and forth. And he busted out, and somebody's like, well, yeah, but can you stand on that? And Kevin's a big guy too. And he's like, you know, he's Wes's size. And he like looks at it, he goes, well, I'm not really set up for it. I'm like, dude, just move your camera. So he literally like grabs his camera and he puts the QU on the floor and he stands on it, and he didn't tell anybody, but he's barefoot and he's wearing shorts. And he's got this kind of loose shirt on, and it's like it's a collared shirt, but it's got a pattern. And somebody goes, this is like Fred Flintstone on mixers. It was awesome because he was barefoot. And it was like, so he is now the Freddie Flintstone of the mixing industry. But yeah, it's fun hysterical stuff. Yeah. So
go ahead.
Felix, what do you got for a mixer in that studio of yours? What are you using, or are you just going direct into the computer?
I'm going direct into the computer.
Let me send you an SQ, because I don't know if you know it or not, but there's a USB port on the back of that, and you can get some 2496 audio into there.
I had an SQ until 2 weeks ago, man.
Did you? What'd you do? Sell it?
Sold it.
Dude. Now you're going to have to buy another one, and then we're going to sell it.
Dude, I'll tell you what, those little Zed mixers. So here's a funny story. When we first when Highway first took on the Allen Heath line, my oldest daughter, one of her summer projects was she had to do a podcast. So I was like, and anybody that knows me that my mantra is anything worth doing is worth overdoing. So like I set up the 7B that I have here on a boom on a table, and like the whole thing.
He has a makeup crew for these things once a month.
Right. Yeah. So she has to do this little thing that most people are talking into the computer microphone, and I have a full podcast studio set up on the table, right? But the thing that I used was the ZI. And it has a USB port out on this little mixer that has a couple of channels and stuff. And
that'll do 2496.
Well, and that's the thing. I didn't know it did that at the time. I was just like, oh, I can come out of that and I'll use that. And so I recorded it and I started listening back to it to master it, because of course I was mastering it. And I'm listening to it. I'm like, man, this thing sounds amazing. Why does this thing sound so good? And that's when I started digging through there. I was like, oh, it's 2496 out of this little tiny. I mean, it's literally like this big, you know, it's crazy how good that thing sounded. So that was my first foray into the very small format Allen and Heath stuff. And I'm like, oh, okay, no matter what price point you're hitting, they're trying to give good audio is the first thing. And, you know, that's huge for me.
There was a early summer I played in a band, and we did a video.
Hey, what band is that, by the way?
I think I'm gonna hire you as my manager, man, because you say the name way more. It's beautiful, man. Not even my mom has a record on the wall.
Cilantro Boombox, is that it? Yeah, that's that band.
That's the band. Those guys. We did a thing where we rented a boat and we played on top of the boat, and we had 2 sound guys. We had a guy taking care of everything, all the front of house basically, and he recorded everything. And then monitor guy, he had an SQ, and everything went in here. When I get the mix at the end of the night, there were some issues in the mix, some things I didn't get in the actual mix. So I talked to front of house guy and I was like, send me the multi-track, because the monitor guy was actually Andy from Nomad here in Austin. He was actually
he's awesome,
multi-tracking. He was like, do you want me to record everything? And I say, yeah, we should, just in case. Sure enough, we needed the multi-track. I sent them to to front of house guy, and he mixes them, and he sent me a text like at 3 a.m. He's sitting mixing after a gig, and he's like, I think this ruined me. I want to mix on 96K from now on.
Always.
Yes.
Yeah. People that say that they don't think that they can hear it in a live environment, you know, like, I don't care how long you've been in the industry or how tired your ears are, you're going to hear it. And you're going to hear that phase coherency in a huge way.
Oh yeah.
Huge.
Yeah. Can we just back up and talk about how baller it is that you rented a boat? Can we start with that? You know,
well, it was a party. It was a party boat that basically told us, you just pay for gas, man. We don't have any business. We know the guy.
It doesn't matter how you did it.
I don't care.
We pulled it off. We pulled it off. A river boat.
Bring it, Felix. Jeez.
Cool way to do the video too, by the way. When are we going to see video of that show?
They've been going out already.
Have they?
You're not paying attention.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I missed it. Yeah. I did see. You sent me a couple, and I didn't know if that was actually public or not. Yeah. So I was just,
it came out
trying
of
to do some promo.
As a joke, can we rent the boat? Would there be a drone? And we laughed, and then 3 days later, we got it done. we figured it out.
It's funny how stuff like that happens, where you're like, "Oh man, wouldn't it be funny if we did this?" And then 3 days later, you're like, "Oh, I'm doing that thing." Okay.
Speaking of, Wes and Danny Edwards from Highway Marketing have committed to get ampersand tattoos, matching ampersand tattoos for.
Really?
Yeah.
That was a private conversation.
That's a Lyle Lovett song, right? It's a Texas thing.
Yeah. Felix sent us a text that showed.
That was Ben. I'm gonna give him full credit because that was beautiful.
That's right. It was Ben. A text of somebody that there was a picture where somebody was walking and on their Achilles tendon or something. There was a little ampersand on there, and he sent Denny and Wes's next tattoo. I was like,
absolutely
okay.
Perfect. It's perfect.
I offer money. I said I pitch in, man, and I think we all would love to see that.
You don't even need to, because you're going to see it in the renewal for the rep contract. It's the Bulldogs, the guys that will win Bulldog Awards, all volunteer for that. We don't even have to ask them because they volunteer.
Wow. Okay. So we done here?
I think on that note, we should leave because it's gonna go south really easy.
Yeah, because we're already talking about tattoos. You know, it's like, oh yeah, you want to see mine? I gotta.
We will know why his name is Sparkle. Yeah. Thank you for tuning into Beer and Gear, Gear and Beer,
Cider and Beer,
and Beer. Pat, always a pleasure, sir. Thank you,
gentlemen. Thank you very much for hosting. All y'all have yourself a fabulous weekend, and thanks for bringing me in.
Beautiful.
Take care, guys.
And we're not live anymore. Hopefully.
Sweet. Well, that was fun.
That was fun.
That was a lot of fun, man.
Dude, you guys, this was a blast. Thanks a lot.
What I said was you left the call, and he goes.